A very good morning, our dear listeners and viewers. Welcome to another edition of The Other Perspective. My name is Abel Eseru, your host of the show today. We are going to be discussing about monetized media and political accountability. Kindly, please, before we proceed, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit on the button, and also follow us on our Facebook, which is ACFIM UG, and also like our Twitter handle or follow us on our Twitter handle, that is ACFIM UG. Today we are going to be having three distinguished guests who have a journalistic background, who are going to help us interrogate and discuss this topic on monetized media and political accountability. We are going to have Mr. Henry Muguzi, who is an electoral democracy expert and also had a very good history in terms of working as a media person, and is going to give us his journey on how he used to work in the media and the current changing trends of how media is operating in the current context of the world and also Uganda. And then we shall also be joined by Priska Wanyenya. Priska Wanyenya is a journalist who works for both print and online media and also a member of Uganda Parliamentary Press Association, which covers proceedings in the Parliament of Uganda. And then we shall also be joined by Mr. Felix Kafuma, who is an expert in political finance, but also has an element of journalistic experience in him, and is going to share with us some of his knowledge in the field of journalism. As we do know, for much of the modern democracy, media has been considered one of the most powerful agents of democratic accountability. Media plays an instrumental role in terms of free and fair society, and we do believe that it should serve as a watchdog to the powerful by holding them to account on behalf of their citizens at large. I want to start with Henry. You've worked before in the media arena before you crossed to civil society. And we do believe that an independent media remains one of society's most effective assets available to curb corruption and foster accountability. Could you kindly walk us through your journey in terms of the changing trends of journalism in Uganda and Africa at large?
Thank you very much, Abel. Let me start by expressing my deepest condolences to the families that lost their loved ones yesterday when Kampala, where we are speaking from, was attacked by suicide bombers. This act, of course, disrupted business, instilled fear, and those who lost their loved ones, of course, we condole with you. But of course, also those that are still in hospital, nursing, recuperating from the wounds that were nursed by that cowardly act. We condemn the acts of terrorism in the strongest possible terms. And let me also call upon fellow Ugandans. I think fighting the terrorists, as you saw, needs all of us. It cannot be only a responsibility of the security operatives. We all need to be vigilantes. And only then can we be able to fight and chase the terrorists away from our land. We don't need terrorism in Africa. We've had a fair share of problems. But that said, yeah, of course, as a journalist, one of my former bosses once told me that once a journalist, always a journalist. Yes, I have been a journalist before. I think I'm one of the few that had the privilege of working with both print and electronic media. So I've tested both sides of the divide. And of course, now I'm into the arena of activism. But of course, I'm happy to see that there are still quite a number of colleagues that are keeping the fire burning. And of course, Priska being one of those active journalists. It's an honor to share the platform with you. As a journalist, you will understand our duty is to inform, is to educate, but also because we work with the media, then where we can, especially those that work in electronic media, is to entertain. Now, today, as everybody knows, the world has become a global village, and therefore a necessary tool for the process of communication, of which mass media is a key player. We as media, of course, we proud ourselves in reminding the powers that be that our calling and our role in society is that of watchdog. And I want to state at the onset that watchdog role that is played by the media is very critical and crucial for democracy to thrive and blossom. The primary, the media is that entity. We refer to it often as the fourth estate that gets to connect. First of all, we connect with the people, all right, that we have. We are able to bring out the feelings, the views, the attitudes of the people and project them, present them to the powers that be, but we do not stop there. Okay, the function of the media is also to observe the activities of the state and fearsome, and expose them without fear. Okay, every time we see maladministration or exploitations on official delegated authority, such as the authority that we as citizens delegate to the peoples that occupy offices of power, we are duty bound as media to expose these, expose them to the punitive eye of public scrutiny. This is the role we play. But we also play the role of mobilizing the citizenry to hold those elected leaders to account. And therefore, the role of media in democracy, in enhancement of political accountability cannot be underestimated. Unfortunately, what is the situation in Uganda? In Uganda, we find ourselves in a context that does not necessarily favor what we have. First of all, let me state that one of the biggest challenges we are facing, the media is facing in Uganda, is the commercialization of that sector. Private investors have raided the sector. They have invested in the media industry, and in doing so, they have undermined and underlooked the principles for which media stands for, and to them, they have placed profit before service. This contradiction has made it difficult for media to play its role. These investors rarely respect journalism as a profession. They do not pay journalists. They have defied and undermined every living principle of journalism. Journalism has been sacrificed at the altar of profits. As a consequence, well-meaning journalists have left the industry, and therefore the profession has become something that the private investors think anybody thinks they can open up a TV or a radio or a newspaper and make money. This is the challenge you're grappling with. Because money makers and profiteers have penetrated the industry, the role of media as an antidote of corruption has also been affected. Today, the media and journalists, for that matter, have fallen prey to the very corruption they're supposed to expose. These challenges have made it difficult for the media to play its role. Never mind that the security operatives have also made it difficult in terms of ensuring that they brutalize the journalists who are covering the important activities. And therefore, to cut the long short, the role of the media, as much as it is crucial and central to the democratization process, when it comes to Uganda, corruption and commercialization of the industry has turned the profession on its head. And I'm looking forward to quite an insightful discussion on this matter. Back to you, Abel.
Thank you so much, Henry. Priska, you've just heard Henry allude that money makers and profiteers have entered the media industry. Now it's more about profit instead of offering service and reporting objectively and accurately to the citizenry. So, do you think when we have money makers and profiteers in the industry of media, can there be objective, accurate, and balanced journalism reporting under such a context? You as a journalist, Priska.
Priska, is she muted?
Priska, are you muted? Priska, are you on? I think this technology has again started its issues. But I wanted Priska to respond to your argument that money makers and profiteers have entered the media industry, and I wanted to hear from her whether, with such a context, we can be able to have an accurate, balanced, and
as she comes in, Abel, I can share a personal testimony. When I left the print media, and that was the government-owned New Vision newspaper, which was being run by an Englishman that had put in place systems. I joined the private TV that was only beginning. So I joined TV at a time when the investor thinks that actually one of the avenues for making profit is to charge money on news. And when I joined, that is not clear at the onset. So, but as the TV progresses, then this mentality comes in. So I face a situation where I'm told that we should also, we should maximize revenue by ensuring that some of the news items that go on TV get to be charged. And of course, when I said no, that was the genesis of our departure. But I'm sharing this to tell you that by allowing money makers and profiteers, some of them don't even have a clue about the profession called journalism, to invest in the media industry. That has undermined the central role media plays in enhancement of political accountability and by extension, democracy. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Henry. Priska, before you left, there was a question I wanted to respond to. I don't know whether your network is now a bit okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Yes, I'm getting you now.
Okay, Henry had initially hinted out that money makers and profiteers have now entered the arena of the media industry, and it's no longer about following the journalistic principles. It's all about making money and not offering the service the media is supposed to do as a watchdog. Is that the case in the current context? And do you think there can be objective and accurate reporting when we are under such a context of monetized media environment?
I totally agree with Henry's submission. You're getting me now?
Yes.
Are you in position? Yeah, I totally agree with Henry's submission. And let me first extend my condolences to the families of the people who had lost their loved ones and those who are still in hospitals, because the blast that happened at Jubilee insurance building happened when we are within the parliament building. So we saw the pieces of meat littered around the place, Parliament Avenue, and I've not yet recovered. The torture is still there. But one when we talk about the ethics in journalism, I will use yesterday's example because we had an incident where Mulago Hospital allowed in journalists to go and film the patients who are in hospital. I really thought that was so insensitive, both on the side of the hospital and the journalists themselves. I hope the editors who ran such footage will go back and rethink, because in some serious countries those patients can sue you. We are lucky we are in Uganda. And back to Henry's submission, when you look at the business module of the media industry in Uganda, we heavily rely on the adverts from government. So the moment government cuts you off advertising, that explains why currently, post-COVID era, after COVID was declared in Uganda, the media industry has suffered because even government has gone back to rethink on its budget, now cutting off money for advertising. And I think it is time that the media industry thought about which business model they are going to take. Because for that, I managed to get information that for the 2 times they have declared lockdown, the NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters, they have been in position to get some funding from government to help them go through the COVID era, in the first lockdown and even in the second one. And in the first lockdown, they requested for 15 billion and 5.5 was released, and only 2.5 was given to media houses, but it's not clear on which particular media houses received this money. And in the second lockdown, it so happens that in the first lockdown, this money was the one we knew about as the public. But the second lockdown, I also found out that there was another package of money that came to the media houses, that from government. And they still requested for 15 billion. And this time around, government released, approved 8.5 billion. And apparently, it is only New Vision, Next Media, UBC, and Capital FM that received this money. We do not know which criteria that was used for to reach upon this decision that these are the media houses that are so badly off that they will crash. We up to now we don't know. So some people are thinking that this money went to only benefit the owners of the media houses, because if there is a big crowd, a crowded media industry of about 360 radio stations, you see that. But I'm told only about 63 received part of this money. And the mere fact that we didn't even know, as a parliament reporter, I didn't even know that in the second lockdown there was money that was released for media houses. That shows you how the issue of transparency, and it brings back to because if we media players are not even transparent over this small money, 8.5 billion, how are we going to hold government accountable? So when you talk about the commercialization of the media industry, government penetrating with the political players, when you talk with UCC about the issue of politicians taking over media house, you almost see that every politician has a radio station. But for them, they tell you that we cannot deny someone a license simply because that person is a politician. What for the model that UCC came up with is to increase transparency. They claim if someone applies for a license for a radio station, what they do is they put up an advert, and within 14 days, if there is any issue you have, say, against Abel, you will think he cannot manage a radio station or he will be a threat to the journalism, you have to complain, write to UCCB within 14 days. But UCC says they have never even received any complaint. So after 14 days, for them, they simply approve the license. So now we are looking at the issue of politicians managing the media industry now. And the hands of UCC are tied, even as they have. So now, right now, the only issue we can handle right now is self-censorship as journalists. We have to look into our ethics as journalists, because we cannot keep on fighting UCC that why are you allowing in politicians? That is a battle we have lost in the first place. So I think the only issue we have to deal with is self-censorship. So the commercialization, as alluded to by Henry, is too much, as he says, and it is really affecting the media industry, even the perception from the public as the players.
Thank you so much, Priska. Felix, you've just had Priska sharing with us about how the media is now an area that's owned by politicians, and also we do know that there are some wealthy businessmen who are also owning this media industry, especially particularly radio stations. And we see every time they open up these radio stations, they are aiming at pushing for a certain agenda or narrative that suits their own interests and not the interest of the community. You've done enough research, and I know you've also moved around and listened to some of the programs that are being run on these radios. Do you think it's possible for us to have political accountability come from the media side when the ownership is under the politicians and the elites?
Thank you so much, Abel. One thing that viewers out there have to appreciate is that three significant things have happened about concerning media and what is shaping the current narrative of commercialized media space. And let's start from the global perspective, that globally, and it's not unique to Uganda. That's one thing I want to first make the viewers appreciate, that globally, when we are into what we call a liberal economy, and when we enter into a liberal economy, the aspects around ownership of media changed. And when ownership of media changes, it opens a door for wealthy persons who can run and operate media houses to enter the market. Now, wealthy persons, when you are operating in a liberal economy, you don't mind so much. You mind much the figures, the profits. When you start to mind so much the figures and the profits, you tend to compromise on aspects of professionalism, because a professional journalist, for example, is a highly paid media person. That's the starting point. So it means that if you want to professionalize your media space, you will have to also be willing to pay them very well. And if you're willing to pay them very well, you also must be willing to put minimum requirements to run your media house in a professional manner. And usually when the profit margin matters more to the wealthy person who has entered into the market, they start to compromise on those smaller aspects. And that's when you open a door for compromising journalism, the ethics Henry was talking about, and also opening a door for commercial interests to carry the day. And this is not just here, but usually when you have a liberal economy, it means that you have a government that is supposed to do the regulatory function. So that they cut a balance between professionalism or professionalizing the industry and making profits. Unfortunately, when it comes to Uganda and its weaknesses in terms of the regulatory framework, and the mafiaism around media ownership and the weaknesses also that come with the institutions that are mandated to keep an eye, keep in check, and control media. We miss out on the elements of quality control to protect consumers. And also, when we talk about protecting consumers, it also means to protect the practice and ethics that come with the discipline of journalism. So now you have, like my colleague has just said, you have anybody come up on a media house. Now, remember, when it's a liberal economy, it means because of the power of the media, anybody who wants to control the narrative must control media. The best way to control media is to own media. And this is not just here in Uganda, but it's also in other developed countries. So now, that's why it explains you why there is an influx of media personalities, influx of politicians, influx of wealthy people with political ambitions. Because we are in a political economy, it's difficult to separate properly politics and economy in Uganda, for example. You have many of them now take interest in the industry called media, and then you have politicians owning media houses to control narrative. So they are not necessarily owning media houses to play the primary function of media, which is educate, inform, entertain, and then also play the fourth estate role. No, they are in that market to protect their interests, to protect their political interests, to protect their business interests. And if that is the priority why they're in that market, it means that the way they will use that space will be not necessarily to promote political accountability. It will be mainly to the end of protecting their personal interests. Now, there's also something that has emerged over time, what we call the media in the marketplace. In fact, there's even a theory explaining that media in the marketplace presupposes that the audience now assumes a different role. The different role of the audience in this case is that the audience becomes the consumer of content. And when it becomes the consumer of content, it means that now, when audience is consuming the audience, now also the media owners, because they must make money, sell the audience to the advertisers. Now, when you have such kind of a market economy for the media, where now the audience is a product, becomes a product, you start to realize that the content that they sell to the audience has to be that content that advertisers would find compelling to buy when they come to buy the audience. Does political accountability in that kind of mix now arise? It becomes very difficult for you to have political accountability as something that can easily be bought in form of content, can easily be bought by advertisers, because media must thrive media in a market economy must thrive on profits, on numbers, and those numbers come from advertisers. So we are in between. I would say media currently is between a rock and a hard place. So the new emerging perception and understanding of audience is also compromising on to what extent can media play a watchdog role, a fourth estate role. And that's where now we are, that you now have media captured by businessmen who own media houses, and media now running after or pursuing interests of businessmen, and not necessarily the original function or the primary function of media as a space, or of journalism. In that kind of arrangement, you realize that it becomes very difficult for professionalism, for ethics to be upheld by media practitioners. Even when you find someone who is a professional media practitioner, or a journalist, because the environment dictates to behave a certain way, you find them dropping or compromising their ethics while at job, and to toe the line of the media house which is running the figures and employing that journalist. And that's why my colleague said that it will now boil down to the individual to exercise professionalism in that kind of toxic space. And that's why we are. I thought I should share that context to appreciate how do we get where we are when it comes to how does commercialization of media eventually emerge to the extent that the traditional functions of media are no longer of relevance, but also it points the question to the capacity of the state to play a regulatory role, because that's now the remaining space to protect consumers, to protect users, protect audiences from manipulation of this monetized media space. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Felix. We are going to go for a short break, and then we shall return with the second episode segment.
Everything, the snacks are on the way.
Yeah, thanks, but the reason that's why we are here, our people need those public services. We at least need an ambulance at every center.
My sub-county is the forest. We used to depend on the former MP's vehicle, but when he lost his elections, he took away his vehicle.
Of course.
So what does that mean?
Use your budget as a district to procure the ambulances.
If I could, I would. But unfortunately, government operates differently.
I'm saying, Chairperson, this is very serious and urgent.
Yes, I know. And why are they called local leaders then?
Local government.
You people, who sent you here?
I know, of course. We are concerned citizens who are watching people dying every day.
We've lost our beloved ones just because of poor health services.
Something has to be done.
You are right. Something has to be done, and very fast.
Yes.
That's transport for you. Go back.
But
All your concerns are taken care of. I will handle.
But
Have a
Chairman,
safe journey.
Thank you so much.
but this man seems to undermine our cause as to why we're here.
No, don't misunderstand me. This is just transport, no strings attached.
Chairman, we came here to discuss and find solution to our problems. But it seems you don't want to engage with us. Let's go and mobilize people, and you will see how serious we are.
Good citizens, let us always hold our leaders accountable. Leadership is a service, not a privilege.
Contribute today at www.politicalfinanceafrica.org/donate. Together, we can contribute.
Welcome back from that short break. Today we are discussing about monetized media and political accountability. Before we went for that short break, Felix was sharing about how media is now owned and by politicians and business persons, and it's now preoccupied to protect the interests of those politicians and those business wealthy persons. Now, I want to bring Henry here. You have just heard the two, both Priska and Felix, hinting that media is now an arena of those wealth. how feasible and how possible is it for us to push for political or promote political accountability in a context whereby the media is owned by the personalities whom society is supposed to look into and ask them for their inaction and actions, bring them on board, and also the media should help society flag off some of the mistakes some of those people make. Is it really possible for us to hold such people accountable when the media, which is also supposed to help society, show some of the things those guys do and they're not in line with maybe their constitutional mandates to in terms of good governance and promoting accountability? Is it possible for us to have a free media under the ownership of the politicians and the wealthy individuals?
Thank you, Abel. And of course, that is a very interesting question. When you look around, the greed and the commercialization that came in when private interests chose to invest in the media industry seems to have rubbed off on journalists themselves as well. As we speak today, you will find that just as the owners of media houses have privatized and commercialized the spaces, the editors and journalists have done the same. All of them have now gravitated towards commercialization, which is why you will not be surprised when the editor is presented with a very good, well-investigated expose of corruption, for example, instead of exposing that to the benefit, allowing that to be published for the benefit of the citizenry, who would then expose the people involved in public scrutiny, you do not be surprised that the editor picks up the phone and calls the very people that are named in the story. The bottom line is to make money out of it. In such circumstances, countless good stories have tended to be sacrificed at the altar of greedy editors. Because the reporters have seen the editors do this, they have also learned the trick. When they go to the field, first of all, they've been demobilized, demotivated. Not many journalists in Uganda today, and perhaps in many other parts of Africa, would be hell-bent on ensuring that they conduct a very good, in-depth and detailed investigation on a story that would inform or that would serve the purpose of the role the media plays as the fourth estate. And therefore, the journalists themselves are monetized every day. You see them going around collecting rent. When they appear on a story, they also want to profit as much as they can. Which is why you are not surprised to hear stories such as some journalists being placed on payrolls of certain economic powers or political powers for the reason of ensuring that all stories that seem to dent the image of those economic and political powers get to be nipped in the bud. You cannot have the media play its role in situations like these. So when you ask about whether media can do this, it can't. But the question is, what can we do? I think we need surgery here. First of all, the challenge is of how do we get professional journalists back into the industry? Because as of now, the failure of the investors to pay journalists well has chased good journalists from the industry. So you have now a media organization where the most qualified journalist is holding a certificate in journalism. Little reason, therefore, that when they go out to cover stories, maybe there's a riot. The policeman who has never stepped foot in media school, in journalism school, finds the guts or picks the guts of raising a baton and hitting the journalist on the head. During my days, such a thing will not happen. Why? Because we had cultivated a reputation. We were respected and revered as journalists, and we knew we were imbribable. Today, when you speak about ethics and ethos of a journalist to the current journalists who are occupying spaces in the current media organizations, it's like you are singing music to the dog. And therefore, we have a lot to do, but it all boils down to allowing these self-seeking interests to invest in the media. And of course, my colleague Felix hit the nail on its head when he questioned, where is Uganda Communications Commission? Where is the regulator? Where can we not be able to set up standards that must be followed by these operators and owners of media organizations, that the organizations that are certified to offer the service as media organizations at least are able to meet half the standard? These are some of the things you can consider. But in a situation where you have a context where the regime, the state operatives, the state institutions that are perpetrating the violations of rights do not want to be exposed, a situation where there is very limited respect accorded to journalists, a situation where the editor picks up a phone call and calls a thief and tells the thief that I have a story here. What do I do with it? How can you handle journalism like this? And therefore, I think the monetization of the media is the biggest problem we have. We always speak about monetization of politics and other things, but I think monetization of the media is one of the issues we need to grapple with as citizens and have a serious conversation around in order to ensure that we restore the very known role, crucial role of the media plays in enhancing political accountability and the democracy. Back to you, Abel.
Priska, you've just had Henry share his thoughts about how the media personnel, especially the reporters and editors, are now engaging in crafty work of also trying to be greedy and getting money from those people who are supposed to be exposed, or even wherever they go to get news, they want something in terms of facilitation of money. I want to know if you are a journalist. Is journalism more about money or is it about conviction and passion? In your own understanding, is it more about money nowadays, or because there's no longer conviction, I think, among some of the journalists of nowadays?
I'll begin by sharing with you our experience as journalists at Parliament, because the first time I was at ACFIM, I was talking about the speakership race. And after the race ended, you know, there were groups of journalists who were aligned to Jacob. There were groups aligned to Auntie Betty, as we call her. Then there was a group of us who chose not to be aligned anymore. And at the end of the day, you know how the speakership race came about. But what the recent development is the group that was aligned to LJ has been awarded. Most of them have gotten, some of them have gotten jobs, and in Parliament they created slots for them. So you can imagine the mood that is around, especially those of us who didn't get aligned to anyone. So we are like, no, you guys don't laugh at me.
Next time you will align yourself.
Now we are like, we have been left to languish, because these are the people we where we work from. So people were arguing this daily, but now they are getting a 7-figure salary, permanent, pensionable jobs. Now, us who chose to act professional, because I was not aligned to any of the candidates, because I knew that even if OJ takes it or Becky takes it, there is nothing, there is no impact. I even told Henry when I came there, but those are the results now. So when you're talking about the commercialization of politics, do you see the tricky position we are in now? Those of us those of our colleagues who stepped away from the professionalism are no longer going to run after tear gas. Now, those of us who stayed in, we have left. Okay, now, you should stop laughing at me. The appointments were confirmed this week, so you can imagine the demoralization we are working in right now. You have to pray for us. So, but we cannot keep on lamenting about politicians commercializing politics or taking over our space. It's now upon us as journalists to reclaim our position. And the only way we are going to reclaim our position is by doing the right thing. We have to end this idea of the clickbaits, because right now, the 5 years ago, we knew Red Pepper for being the sensational one, the one with screaming headlines. But nowadays, you cannot even differentiate between a tabloid and a mainstream, because the clickbaits are many, the screaming headlines have been taken over. And that is because the media houses are trying to appease their advertisers. But I tend to think that one of the solutions that the media owners are going to, they have to invest in technology, because now journalism is shifting to the technology side, the internet side. But we are seeing very little investment in terms of our online platform. We are having the same IT people running our social media platforms. Like when you go to New Visions or Monitors online platform, how many adverts are they having to promote? Because that is the only way we are going to generate more income and stop relying on what? On government adverts. Because I really don't know that even after the recovery of opening up the economy, government is going to still continue advertising the same way it did in our media houses. So we, the media owners, have to sit down on the table and rethink of how they are going to fund, if we are going to control the infiltration of politicians into our media, our industry. Because I'm telling you from experience as a journalist. Recently, I got a story about, Sudiri is supposed to appear in Parliament over that Munyonyo shares. He has made it hard for government to take over shares, its management, because government has shares in Munyonyo. So I got a story. I had to first call my editor. Do you write about Sudiri? Nowadays, you have to, for you not to waste your energy, you have to call. Do you write about this one? You see that? So the response my editor gave me was, as long as it is not defamatory. But the story had documents backing it up. But I couldn't go ahead with it because he told me as long as it's not defamatory. So I asked him back, have I ever sent you any defamatory story? He laughed. But I was discouraged with the response he gave me, as long as it's not defamatory. So I was like, why do I waste time? And that is how the story died. You see that? So right now, and when it comes to us who report Parliament, we always play the safe side. You're talking of investigation, but we know that at least stories that are coming from committees and plenary or the chambers are protected by the privilege. So even if someone defames someone, but if you take an investigative story, you're likely to 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 annoy someone. And another experience I had was, I'm telling you from me as a journalist. Like for instance, I was told by my editor that they got a phone call from plot one. You do not write about his family, you don't write about him, and you don't write about his army. You see that? So I got a grant from Routers, and one of the story I was doing, can Museveni fight corruption in this tenure? Because I was following up on his remarks on when he was swearing in. So I wrote the story, and the Routers team, the people who were giving me the grant, they approved it. And it so happens that I was dealing with another editor. So together, when the story came out, and my example was centering on Alice Kaboyo, her appointment as a minister when she has already been convicted. The main editor, the news editor, called me and told me, "What have you done to me? Why did you use Kaboyo's photo?" So she she told me, "Why did you use Kaboyo's photo? Because she's in the first family." You see that? And there was nothing defamatory. I had all the documentation, everything, but the only problem was the photo. So she told me that family, you don't write about it. So that is why nowadays, if I project something is sensitive, I ask them, "Do you write about this one?" So that is now the safest way we are going to do now, and we have no way out.
So, Priska, I want to ask you. We do know that,
So going forward,
we know like the International Consortium for Investigative Journalists is an umbrella that picks stories, investigative stories from various journalists all over the world. Can't you maybe tap into some of those spaces, or do you plan as Ugandan journalists who are still acting in a more professional manner? Do you plan of maybe coming up with an umbrella that can help you be able to publish some of those stories? Because now editors are like killing most of the investigative stories you get. Do you have plans of maybe coming up with your own consortium which helps you always publish such investigative stories?
Actually, one of the issues we are being advised right now, and I would advise other journalists, is to apply for these story grants, because these days, at least once in a week, there's a story grant that comes in. At least once in a month, there is one. So you keep on trying to apply for it. You're trained, and it helps you improve on your investigative skills. And when you talk of a body that investigates, I think Solomon Serwanja and Raymond Muchemi have the same. You know, Solomon Serwanja resigned from NBS, and he has put up an investigative body. So even the forum for editors, they usually have those grants. I think the solution that Solomon is coming up with is one that is going to kind of cure this. Do you write about this one? Yeah. So that is one of the things we are going to do. We have, the journalists have to apply for those trainings from, let me say, ACME. The journalists have to apply for those grants if you're going to supplement on your income. Because as Henry told you, do you know that in some radio stations, journalists are paid as low as 2,000 or 3,000 per story. So there is no way you're going to supplement on your income unless you take up things like the training or to hone your skills, or you're going to apply for these grants once they come up. That is the only way you're going to supplement on your income. And you have to multitask. These things of saying I'm on a radio, you cannot, because I trained in public relations. I hated journalism when I was coming in. You see, when I was at the campus. But now I even did attend any radio class because we used to specialize. I knew that I would never go, but right now I even write radio stories. I write for online. I write for print. You see that? So you have to diversify your skills if you're going to survive in the industry.
Okay, thank you so much, Priska. We are running out of time, so I want each of us to give their parting shots, especially on how we can move forward to ensure that we have a free media that can help us promote accountability, regardless of the ownership of the media, which is right now under the helm of politicians and wealthy business persons. I want to start with you, Henry. Your parting shot.
Okay, Abel, thank you. And of course, as usual, every time I complain about internet service provision in Uganda, after 35 years, 36 years of uninterrupted political stay, we cannot have a stable internet service in the country, and that's regrettable. Now, I think the way forward is that there should be a few good journalists that step forward and say, look, guys, we are not going to associate with the current money makers anymore, because that is the antithesis of our profession. So what can happen is that some of these journalists are going to get together and go perhaps online, where they can publish their investigated stories for the benefit of us citizens that are looking forward to referring to these, using these as reference in order to hold the people in power accountable. I think that is number one. Number two, I think it's important that we start a conversation as citizens with a view of getting pressure to bear on the regulatory authority to set standards such as putting in place a minimum salary scale for a journalist, okay, in order to ensure that at least a media organization can have 3 or 4 professional journalists in it that can observe the principles of journalism. And lastly, I think we need to together as a country come together to fight corruption, because it is the very corruption that is eating up public institutions that is also eating up the moral fabric within the profession of journalism. It's been a pleasure. Thank you and goodbye.
Priska, your parting shot.
Society should realize that the media landscape is changing so swiftly. We can no longer rely on the traditional advertising. So the media owners have to change with the times, invest in technology, and have to invest in that so in themselves career-wise to undertake more training, because the training we get from the university is very basic. We can no longer blame the whatever is happening in our media industry on the politicians. Us as journalists, we have to consider doing the right thing. I think those are my parting thoughts.
Thank you so much, Priska. Felix.
Thank you so much. I think for me, I have one on top of what Priska and Henry has shared, is that there are other emerging opportunities that are available for media to take advantage of. The online space is not yet overly controlled and highly edited to the extent that they can pursue personal blogs where they can expose some of these things, where they can practice and exercise ethics and integrity and have their stories aired. And I think for me, that's an opportunity. The online news, they can also pursue podcasts. And I've seen this with most of the journalists that I know that I've been following in these the main media houses. I've taken on, I've opened up podcasts, I've opened up blogs, having realized that some of their content doesn't end up in the mainstream media because of those challenges Priska just shared. So I think that's the space they can exploit. Thank you so much.